Hey, welcome back, and I've got good news and bad news. The good news is we're not on the lymphatic system anymore. The bad thing is we're on another interesting chapter. Now, actually, we're gonna combine chapters 17 and 18. 17 is the digestive system, and 18 is nutrients and metabolism. So, what we're going to do is we're going to combine these two chapters, and they kind of fit in well together. It's really interesting when we have biology 211, we have the first one, and we cover the first 11, 12 chapters of human anatomy. We're studying some real specific things, terms and different things. So what's happening once again in the second half of this, in this human anatomy part 2, we're getting more specific. So it's a little trickier. So we're going to talk about the digestive system first. Now, here's what I'm going to do. If you remember on the lymphatic system, I gave you an overview of the lymphatic system. I went through, I tried to explain the lymphatic system and the B cells, T cells, and that type thing. And then I gave you a series of test material that you needed to really study for your test. And I know, kind of complicated. And once again, it's not like I want to just make this class, harder than it needs to be. What we really are trying to do here, we've got to meet standards. We're North Central accredited, so we've got to meet certain standards. So that's why even there's times where I'm like, oh, I hate that there's so many practice questions for you to have to do. But once again, it tells us that you have an overview of the chapter. And Hull's Human Anatomy, you see a lot of these. This is a real popular text because it follows the standards that you need to know, the college standards that I have to prove that you know to get credit for this class. So anyway, that being said, I'm going to do something a little bit like I did the last time. I'm going to go through and we're going to discuss the digestive system. And then we're going to also discuss nutrients and metabolism. So I'm going to do an overview of chapter 17 and chapter 18. Now, take brief notes, but don't get wrapped up into writing everything we say. Try to listen for understanding. Try to look through your book. Don't even think so much about the test. Okay. So let's go through chapter 17, and then we'll do chapter 18. I'm just going to walk you through your book. So you've got your book down in front of you. Once again, we use the 13th edition. If you've got something different, you can try to figure it out, listen as you go, or you can get on Amazon or somewhere and buy a copy of this Hull's Human Anatomy. Now, you don't want to buy the new edition. It's going to cost you about $158 just for the book. So, Hull's Human Anatomy, 13th edition, very effective. It's kind of cool. I was visiting with I guess I shouldn't say which college it was. It was a major Division I college, and I ran into somebody that taught this class, taught human anatomy at that college, and I said, hey, I'm really, we're using the 13th edition of Hull's Human Anatomy, and I know they've got a couple more editions out. Do you teach the new edition? And I was kind of hoping that they would say, I teach the new edition, because I wanted to sit and pick their brain and compare the differences of what I saw and what they saw. And it was really interesting because this is, like I said, major Division I college, and they said we use Hull's Human Anatomy 13th edition because it's the best edition, and we feel like the other editions actually deleted some stuff. So I'm like, wow, I'm feeling really good about that. So, okay, chapter 17, digestive system. Okay, so, we've got the real simple stuff, how the digestive system has chemical changes and physical changes, and from the time we take in food, by the time we take in this, we've got to break out all of the organisms that we have, okay? We got to break out all of the nutrients, we got to break out all the vitamins, we got to break out the water, we got to break things down. Digest means to take something larger and make it smaller. That's our Latin equivalent of the word digest. We got to take something large and make it smaller. That's a digestive system. Take a hamburger and make it carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and so forth. All right. Now, one of the things that I want to show you, and I'm going to kind of walk you through your book here and hit some highlights. Page 649 talks about the gut microbiome. Okay, so we used to think we used to think, golly, we've learned so much. My mom taught nursing, and all the time I was growing up, she was a nurse when I was really young, and then she received her master's and her extended teaching degree from Texas Tech University, and then she taught nursing at a college near us, and she loved teaching nursing, and her area was this human anatomy was a big part of the nursing, but it was as well as she did a lot of specialty areas. But I love to share with her because my mom is 85 years old, and she doesn't look old. I'll give her credit for that. And she's not even watching this, so I'm not brown nosing here. But my mom, whenever I talk about some of the new things, like I was talking to her about interferon, and she was pretty impressed. And then I talked about the B cells and the T cells, and then I talked about how we take tuberculosis organisms and put them in cancer cells, and she says, that's just absolutely amazing. And she said, it kind of makes me sad. And I said, well, why is that? She said, because I saw the old treatments that we had and how so many people died, and the old treatments were still hit and miss. And we, she said, our early deal for cancer was to cut it out. And she said, I have been a nurse, she's a surgical nurse. She said, I've assisted doctors who have cut out cancer, and they don't, now, my dad who's like 88 years old, okay, just went the other day and got some melanoma cancer cut off the side of his face, and they went in and they took quite a bit out, but then they stopped, and then they were actually able to take a sample of the tissue and look at it and see if any of the cancer cells were still on the tissue before he left the doctor's office. So within an hour, they were able to take tissue samples below the cut and go in and run a test to see if there's, and look at it to see if there's any cancer cells, looking for bad nuclei. And they could tell him whether they got it all or they needed to go down a little bit more. And so that's amazing. And if they can do it, they can make as many passes as they need, but they don't need to go any deeper than the cancer cells are. But given they can take that to the lab right then and look at it and tell if those cells if the cancer cells are all gone, that's incredible. So my mom, we were talking about, my dad always thought he had ulcers, and thought that ulcers were due to, we always thought ulcers, and I bet you somewhere in your back of your mind, you think ulcers are due to worry, okay? So we used to think that somebody that had ulcer, now what's an ulcer, okay? Actually, this is going to come out in our digestive system. So the stomach, okay, the stomach is actually, has this tissue, okay, it's a strong tissue, but on the inside of this tissue, we're going to secrete this acid that's about as strong as battery acid, you need to hold right through. So what an ulcer is whenever we have, an ulcer means once again, Latin terminology here, an ulcer means a hole. So we have a hole through something, okay? So a small peripheral hole. So we used to think that if we worried too much, we produced more stomach acid. So we would say you need to eat crackers or drink milk or something. So we used to think that an ulcer was because we worried too much and we produced too much stomach acid, and it ate a hole through our stomachs. So my dad taught school and he coached, and so they would be like, I got to quit worrying so much. I'm getting these ulcers. My stomach's hurting. The doctor says I'm getting stomach acid eating a hole through my stomach. And so he always thought he had ulcers. Well, now come to find out, guess what? Most of the ulcers, you can still get ulcers from worrying too much, but that's like about 5% of the ulcers that are out there. What we actually find is we find that there's actually a bacteria that grows in the stomach, and this bacteria, talk about natural selection, this bacteria has learned to survive in the stomach, so it's learned how to thrive on stomach acid, and this bacteria grows like crazy, and it not only grows crazy, it needs food, and it actually eats a little hole through the stomach lining and causes that acid to be able to go out of the stomach, causing an ulcer. So we find that a large number of our ulcers now are actually caused from microorganisms, from bacteria in the stomach. And guess how we get rid of those ulcers? We literally have an antibiotic that we take, and it goes into the stomach and it kills that bacteria, and the person no longer has ulcers. My dad took the antibiotic. Here he was, and I doubt that I was ever a cause of the ulcer. I'm sure I never caused him to worry or be stressed. So I was go on record. Now, I had a brother that probably caused that, but no, I don't know. So, but my dad, his ulcer wasn't caused from worry or stress. His ulcers were caused from this bacteria. So my dad, so they learned this, and my dad's like 70 years old. Okay, at the time. Okay, now he just. Matter of fact, my dad just turned 87 the other day, but. My dad's like 70 years old, and he takes his antibiotic, and boom, he has no more ulcers. So we learned that bacteria is a big part of the digestive system. So when it talks about the gut microbiome, we're learning that bacteria plays a bigger role than we ever thought. Now, let's look at, of course, on page 650, we have all the different parts of the digestive system. And we go through all the things. We'll talk about liver, gallbladder, pancreas. We'll talk about all those things. But from the time, this is amazing. From the time the food goes into your mouth, okay, or water, or whatever it is, till it goes all the way through your system, all the way through the exit, also known as the anus, we have a big tube called the alimentary canal. And we have a picture of that on 651, and it's kind of interesting. We show a picture of the tongue, the esophagus, the stomach, and we go through talk about the pancreas, and we go through all of the gerium, the ileum, the apex, the appendix, and all the way down. We go through the large intestines, small intestines, and the whole thing is 8 meters long of this big tube that all this food flows directly through your body and is broken down and processed. And when you look at it, it's amazing. Okay, when you look at it, it's amazing. So we're going to talk about a lot of things, and I want to mention first of all that one of the biggest important things that you need to know about the digestive system is water water is a universal solvent. It breaks down all things. Plus, water causes transport in the body. We have to have water. Think about on page 651. Think about this alimentary canal, 8 meters long. How are we going to keep things moving through this canal and breaking down? And water is a key. So I want to talk about that a little bit, and then I want to touch base on a couple more things. I want to talk about when we start our digestive system and we have our mouth. Okay, I want to talk about how we produce saliva that starts the chemical reaction, because what does saliva do? Okay, how do we break down? There's several different things we need to break down. Saliva breaks down sugars and starches. And so the minute they hit our tongue, okay, and the minute they go into our mouth, they are broken down, and we have an enzyme that begins to break those down. But what about meats and proteins and fats, also known as lipids? Well, the minute that we taste those, okay, then our digestive system triggers in another area, and that's that our liver produces bile. Okay, bile is a really strong chemical that we use to break down proteins. It goes to the duodenum of the stomach, which is the front of the stomach, and whenever we taste meat, just taste the meat, right away, boom, the liver starts producing bile. It goes through the gallbladder, which is kind of like a fuel injector that shoots out a mist of this, bile. So as the meat's going through the duodenum, as it goes right into the stomach, the bile hits it and begins to break down the meat, and it's already dissolved mostly before it gets into the stomach. So a couple of things, we're going to pick up the next video, and we'll keep going with the digestive system.